This woman, her name is Claire, and she's 51 years old. 3 months ago, she thought she had everything figured out. A marriage spanning over 3 decades, 3 grown children, a beautiful home. The American dream, picture perfect. Then one birthday gift changed everything. A simple DNA test kit meant for fun turned into a family nightmare that exposed secrets buried for almost 30 years. And now, Claire is living in her sister's guest room, wondering how her perfect life fell apart so quickly, and why everyone is treating her like the villain in a story where she believes she was just trying to protect the people she loved. I'm Emma, and this is Mrs. Emma, where I bring you real stories about real people navigating the messiest, most complicated moments of their lives. Today's story is about Claire, and what happened when the past she thought she'd successfully buried came back with devastating consequences. Let's dive in. Claire describes herself as someone who had it all together. For 33 years, she'd been married to the same man. They'd built a life that looked perfect from the outside. Their 3 children had grown into adults pursuing their own paths. 2 daughters, ages 29 and 26, both building careers in the city. A 22-year-old son still finding his way. And Claire and her husband owned a nice house in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other's names. If you'd asked Claire 3 months ago how her life was going, she would have smiled and told you it was wonderful, stable, comfortable, safe. But comfortable isn't always the same as honest. It all started when their youngest child gave Claire's husband a birthday present, an Ancestry DNA kit. One of those popular tests that promises to reveal your ethnic background and connect you with distant relatives. The whole family decided to participate. It seemed like harmless fun, a way to bond and maybe discover something interesting about their heritage. Claire's husband was particularly excited. He'd never known his biological father. His mother had remarried when he was young, and his stepfather was the only dad he'd ever known. He hoped the DNA test might finally give him answers about that missing piece of his identity. Nobody expected what actually happened. The results took about 6 weeks to arrive. When they did, the kids got their results first. Claire remembers being in the kitchen, preparing dinner, half listening to her children gathered around a laptop in the living room. They were laughing, comparing percentages of various ethnicities, having fun with the whole thing. Then the laughter stopped. The silence that followed was so complete, so heavy, that Claire immediately knew something terrible had happened. She walked into the living room to find all 3 of her children staring at the computer screen with expressions she'd never seen before. Confusion, shock, something that looked almost like betrayal. Her oldest daughter looked up at her with an expression that made Claire's stomach drop. And then she said the words that would change everything. The DNA results showed that she and her sister shared no genetic material with their father. 0? Nothing. While their brother matched perfectly, showing he was definitely their father's biological son, the 2 girls might as well have been strangers based on the genetic evidence. Claire felt the world tilt beneath her feet. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be a fun family activity, not a detonation that would blow apart 3 decades of carefully constructed normalcy. Her children stared at her, waiting for an explanation. And Claire did what her instincts told her to do in that moment of panic. She screamed. Then she ran to her bedroom and locked the door, ran. For 2 hours, Claire sat on her bed, trying to process what was happening. Part of her hoped it was all a mistake, that somehow the test results were wrong. But deep down, she knew exactly what those results meant, and she knew she was about to have to confess something she'd convinced herself would never need to be discussed. The whole time she kept thinking about how unfair it all was. Why now? After all these years of happiness, of being a family, why did this have to come out? Nobody had been getting hurt before. Her daughters loved their father. He loved them. They'd built a good life together. What was the point of destroying all of that over something that happened nearly 3 decades ago? But there was no avoiding it. She could hear her family talking in the other room. Finally, Claire unlocked the door and walked back out to face them. They were all sitting around the kitchen table. Her husband's face was completely blank, like someone had just told him his entire life had been a lie, which, in a way, was exactly what had happened. Claire sat down and started talking. She told them about Marcus. Marcus had lived just 3 houses down from them, back when they'd first moved to the neighborhood. He was friendly, helpful, the kind of neighbor who'd assist with moving furniture or jump-starting a car. He and Claire's husband had actually gotten along well. They'd work on projects together in the garage, watch sports, do all the typical neighborly things. The affair began about 4 years into Claire's marriage. She doesn't remember exactly how it started, only that it did. One moment led to another, and suddenly she was living a double life. Her husband was working long hours during that period, trying to establish himself in his career. Claire was home with a toddler, feeling isolated and alone. Marcus was there, available, paying attention to her in ways that made her feel valued. It continued for 4 years. 4 years of secret meetings, of lies and excuses, of living 2 separate lives simultaneously. Both of Claire's daughters were born during this time. And yes, Claire knew there was a possibility they might not be her husband's biological children, but she also knew there was a possibility they were. She wasn't keeping careful track of timing. She was just living her life and hoping everything would work out. The affair ended when Marcus got a job transfer and moved across the country. There was no dramatic confrontation, no emotional goodbye. He simply left, and Claire decided to take it as a sign. She would focus on her marriage and her family. She would be the best wife and mother she could possibly be. And for almost 30 years, that's exactly what she did. She threw herself into her role. She managed the household, coordinated family events, kept the social calendar, made sure everything looked perfect from the outside. She never told anyone about Marcus because what would have been the point? He was gone. It was over. Bringing it up would only hurt people unnecessarily. Some secrets, Claire believed, were better left buried, but sitting at that kitchen table with her family staring at her, she had no choice but to explain everything. She watched her husband's face as he processed the fact that 2 of the children he'd raised from birth weren't biologically his. She watched her daughters realize that the man they'd always called dad wasn't their biological father. The entire time Claire was talking, she kept emphasizing how much she loved them all, how the affair didn't mean anything compared to their family, how she'd chosen to end it and focus on what really mattered. She talked about all the wonderful years they'd shared together, all the memories they'd created, all the love that existed between them. She also made sure to mention that Marcus had passed away several years ago, so there was no possibility of him suddenly appearing and complicating their lives. That chapter was completely closed. Her husband sat silently through her entire explanation. The girls were crying. Their son looked like he was in shock, and Claire felt like she was speaking to strangers instead of her own family. When she finished, the silence was overwhelming. Nobody knew what to say, and honestly, Claire was starting to feel frustrated. Why was everyone acting like this was the end of the world? Her husband finally spoke, his voice flat and cold in a way she'd never heard before. He asked if she was certain the girls weren't his. Claire confirmed that yes, based on the DNA evidence, she was certain. He asked how long she'd suspected this might be the case. She told him the truth. She'd always known it was a possibility, but had hoped it wouldn't matter. That's when his anger really surfaced. Not loud or explosive, but quiet and terrifying in its intensity. He started asking questions about timelines, about specific dates and events, trying to piece together exactly when everything had happened and how long she'd been keeping this from him. Claire felt this was unfair. She wasn't lying exactly. She was simply not bringing up something that didn't need to be brought up. There's a difference between actively deceiving someone and just not volunteering information that will hurt them unnecessarily. What was she supposed to have done? Sat him down years ago and said, "Just so you know, there's a chance 2 of our kids aren't actually yours biologically, but don't worry about it." That would have been cruel. Her daughters kept looking between their parents, trying to process everything. Her oldest asked if Claire had ever planned to tell them the truth. Claire explained that she hadn't seen the point in disrupting everyone's happiness over something from so long ago. Her daughter looked at her like she was being selfish, which hurt. Everything Claire had done was to protect this family. Their son sat quietly, clearly feeling strange about being the only one who was definitely his father's biological child. Claire tried to reassure him that this didn't change how they felt about his sisters, that love isn't determined by genetics, but he looked shaken. The worst part was watching her husband. He kept asking about Marcus, about what their relationship had been like, about why it had lasted 4 years if it didn't mean anything. Claire tried to explain that it was complicated, that she'd been young and confused and going through a difficult period in their marriage. But he wasn't interested in hearing about context or circumstances. He also fixated on the timeline, trying to figure out exactly when each daughter was conceived, and whether there was any possibility they could still be his biological children. Each time Claire had to confirm that no, based on the DNA results, there was no chance. She watched him become more devastated. Then he started asking about other things. Had there been other affairs? What else about their marriage was a lie? Could he trust anything she'd ever told him? That's when Claire became defensive. He was acting like she was a serial cheater when this was literally one situation from decades ago that she'd handled the best way she knew how. She reminded him about all their good years together, all the ways she'd been a devoted wife and mother, all the times she'd supported him and put their family first. She explained that keeping this information private had been about protecting everyone, not about being manipulative. But he wasn't listening. He acted like everything good about their marriage was somehow fake now, like 33 years of building a life together meant nothing because of something that happened in the first few years. The girls tried to reassure him that he was still their father no matter what, that they loved him, and this didn't change their relationship. Claire was grateful someone in the room was being reasonable. By the end of the night, he told Claire she needed to leave for a while so he could think. Just like that, after 33 years of marriage, she was supposed to pack a bag and stay somewhere else because he couldn't handle the truth about something from before most people even owned cell phones. Claire asked how long he needed. He said he didn't know. She asked if they could work through this in counseling. He said maybe eventually, but not right now. She asked what she should tell people about why she was suddenly staying at her sister's house. He said that was her problem to figure out. That's how Claire ended up loading a suitcase into her car at 10 o'clock at night, driving across town to her sister's place, trying to explain why her husband had asked her to leave over something that happened literally decades ago. The whole situation felt surreal and completely unfair. Living with her sister Beth has been miserable. Beth keeps giving Claire these disappointed looks, which seems hypocritical coming from someone who's been divorced twice. But the worst part is how her husband is handling everything. Claire tries calling, texting, even showing up at the house to talk. He treats her like a stranger he doesn't want to deal with. When she does reach him on the phone, he's cold and distant, like everything she says is manipulation. What really bothers Claire is how everyone's reacting like this affair was an ongoing betrayal instead of something that ended decades ago. She's been faithful to her husband for almost 30 years since Marcus moved away. 30 years. But apparently that doesn't count for anything. And can we talk about how her husband was back then? Everyone's painting him as this perfect victim, but the truth is he was hardly around during those early years. He was always working late, always tired, always too busy or stressed to pay attention to what Claire needed. She was home alone with a toddler most of the time, feeling isolated and unappreciated. When Marcus started paying attention to her and making her feel valued, it felt like what she deserved. The affair wasn't right, but context matters. She wasn't sneaking around for fun. She was a lonely woman whose husband wasn't meeting her emotional needs, and she found comfort with someone who actually seemed to care. But try explaining that to anyone now, and they act like she's making excuses. Beth keeps telling Claire she needs to take accountability, but what does that even mean? She ended the affair. She focused on her family. She's been a good wife and mother for 3 decades. How much more accountable can she be? The really frustrating part is watching how her husband gets all this sympathy from everyone while Claire is treated like an outcast. Their mutual friends keep checking on him, bringing him meals, offering to help with yard work. Meanwhile, Claire is living in her sister's guest room, being lectured about honesty by people who have no idea what it's like to be in a long-term marriage. He's also been seeing a therapist, which feels like another way to avoid dealing with their problems together. Every time Claire suggests couples counseling, he says he's not ready yet and needs to process his own feelings first. But how long is that supposed to take? It's been 3 months already, and he seems to be getting more distant instead of working toward forgiveness. Last month, Claire suggested marriage counseling again. He said he wasn't ready. She offered to write him a letter explaining everything from her perspective. He said he didn't want to read anything from her right now. She even reached out to their pastor to mediate a conversation. Her husband told the pastor he appreciated the offer but needed more time. How much time does one person need to think about something? They're talking about decades-old history here, not some ongoing situation. The affair is over. Marcus is dead. Their kids are adults who love their father, regardless of biology. They have a whole life together that's worth preserving. But apparently none of that matters as much as his need to punish Claire. The worst part is how he's been handling things with their social circle. Word has gotten out about their separation, and the way he's been discussing their situation makes Claire sound like a monster. She found out from Beth that he told their neighbor Karen the whole story, and now Karen gives her dirty looks. He apparently told his brother everything, because now his whole side of the family treats her differently. His sister used to text regularly, and now Claire is lucky if she gets a response. It's like he's systematically turning everyone against her instead of trying to work through their problems privately, like mature adults. Meanwhile, their kids are getting tired of being caught in the middle. Claire's youngest actually told her last week that maybe she should give Dad more space because he's really struggling with trust issues. Trust issues. After 30 years of faithful marriage following one mistake from when she was young. But here's what really gets Claire. She's been watching him from a distance, and he seems to be doing just fine without her. Better than fine, actually. He's lost weight. He's been more social. He's picked up new hobbies. According to their mutual friends, he seems more relaxed and happier than he's been in years. So much for being devastated and needing time to heal. It's almost like this whole situation has given him an excuse to end their marriage without having to take any responsibility for his own role in their problems. Because let's be honest, their marriage hasn't been perfect for a long time. They've been going through the motions for years, more like roommates than husband and wife. Maybe this DNA test thing just gave him a reason to blow everything up, instead of doing the hard work of reconnecting. 6 months after this nightmare started, the way things have turned out is not what Claire expected or feels she deserved. Her husband filed for divorce 3 months ago. Apparently, all that thinking time he needed was actually time to meet with lawyers and financial advisors and figure out how to, in Claire's words, completely destroy her. The divorce proceedings have been brutal. He hired an aggressive attorney who's been digging into every aspect of their marriage, trying to paint Claire as deceitful and manipulative. They've been requesting bank records, phone records, social media history, everything they can think of to build a case that she's been dishonest about other things too. And they actually found stuff. Not affairs, because Claire had been completely faithful since Marcus, but little things. Like how she opened a credit card a few years ago and didn't tell him about it right away. Or how she'd sometimes tell him she was going to lunch with girlfriends when she was actually going shopping alone. Normal stuff that every married person does, but now it's all being used as evidence that she's fundamentally deceptive. The kids have been pulling away from her. Her oldest daughter told her she's disappointed in how Claire has handled everything and thinks she should have been more honest from the beginning. Even Beth has been making comments about how Claire needs to own her mistakes and accept responsibility. Easy for Beth to say when she's never had to navigate a complicated marriage or make difficult decisions about what information to share and what to keep private. The really infuriating part is watching how everyone has been treating her husband throughout this process. He's gotten so much sympathy and support, like he's some kind of saint who was married to a monster for 33 years. People bring him meals, invite him to social events, check on his well-being. Meanwhile, Claire has been basically ostracized from their entire social circle. Last month, Claire found out that he's been seeing someone, a woman he met through his hiking group. When Claire confronted him about it, he told her it wasn't any of her business what he did with his personal life since they were separated. But the divorce isn't even final yet, and he's already moved on. Like their entire marriage meant nothing to him. The woman is younger than Claire, of course. Probably never been married. Definitely doesn't have kids. From what Claire's heard, she thinks his whole starting over after betrayal story is incredibly romantic. She has no idea what it's actually like to be married for decades, to navigate the complexities of raising children and managing a household and keeping a relationship together through all life's challenges. 2 weeks ago, Claire was at the grocery store when she saw them together. Him and his new girlfriend, laughing and holding hands like teenagers, looking happier than she'd seen him look in years. He saw her too. For just a second, their eyes met across the produce section. Claire expected to see some kind of recognition there, some acknowledgement of everything they'd shared together, some hint of sadness about how things had turned out. Instead, he just looked right through her like she was a complete stranger. Then he turned back to his girlfriend and said something that made her laugh. That's when it really hit Claire that this was actually over. Not just the marriage, but any chance of salvaging anything positive from 33 years of building a life together. He'd completely written her off, erased her from his story, and moved on like she'd never mattered to him at all. Standing there in that grocery store, watching her husband start a new chapter with someone who would never understand what they'd been through together, Claire realized that maybe she'd been wrong about a lot of things. Maybe the affair had mattered more than she thought it did. Maybe keeping it secret for all those years had been a bigger betrayal than she understood. But even now, even seeing how everything has turned out, she still doesn't know what she was supposed to do differently. She still thinks that sometimes protecting the people you love means keeping painful truths to yourself. She still believes that 30 years of faithful marriage should count for something, even if it was built on a foundation that wasn't completely honest. The problem is, none of that matters anymore. Because while Claire was trying to protect everyone from the truth, he was falling in love with someone else's version of honesty. And now Claire is the one who has to live with the consequences of choices she made when she was too young to understand what they would cost her decades later. Claire's story raises some difficult questions that don't have easy answers. When is keeping a secret protecting the people you love? And when is it betrayal? Does 30 years of faithful marriage after an affair count for something? Or does one deception invalidate everything that came after? Is context and circumstance a valid explanation, or just an excuse? What makes this story so complicated is that Claire genuinely believed she was doing the right thing by keeping her secret. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She was trying to preserve her family, to protect her husband and children from a painful truth about something that was already over. But what she didn't understand is that the choice about what truth they could handle wasn't hers to make. By deciding for everyone else what they needed to know, she took away their ability to make informed decisions about their own lives. Her daughters grew up not knowing their biological heritage. Her husband raised children believing they were his, building his entire identity as a father on what turned out to be incomplete information. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't just reveal an affair from decades ago. It revealed that Claire had been making unilateral decisions about their family's reality for nearly 30 years. The tragedy is that Claire still doesn't fully see it from their perspective. She's focused on her own pain, her own sense of unfairness, her own belief that she did the best she could with a difficult situation. And maybe she did. But the best she could included deceiving the people she claims to love most for 3 decades. There's also the question of her husband's response. Has he been too harsh? Should he have been willing to work through this in counseling? Was it fair for him to move on so quickly? These are questions each of us would have to answer based on our own values and experiences. What's clear is that secrets have a weight, and the longer you carry them, the heavier they become. When they finally come out, the impact is often more devastating than if the truth had been told from the beginning. This is Emma, reminding you that honesty isn't always easy, but it's the foundation that real relationships are built on. Without it, even decades of history can crumble in an instant. If this story made you think, if it challenged you, or if you just want to hear more real stories about real people navigating life's most complicated moments, please hit that like button. Share this video with friends who appreciate honest, thought-provoking content. And subscribe to Mrs. Emma so you never miss these powerful stories that remind us we're all human, we all make mistakes, and we're all just trying to figure out this complicated thing called life. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.